The soil looked dry and lifeless. The surface had turned pale and hard, almost like it had given up. The plant above it was not much better. The leaves were dull, slightly curled, and there was no sign of new growth. It felt like something had slowly stopped working, even though nothing obvious had changed. But then, the next morning, something small shifted. The soil felt softer to the touch. The top layer no longer looked tight and sealed. The leaves were not fully revived, but they seemed a little more open, a little less tired. It was not a dramatic change, but it was enough to notice. What makes this surprising is that nothing new was added. No fertilizer. No special product. Just time, moisture, and a simple change in how the soil was treated overnight. If this feels confusing, that's very common. Many gardeners assume that when soil looks tired, it needs more input. More feeding. More effort. But sometimes, the opposite is closer to the truth. There is a quiet process that happens when the soil is left to rest in the right condition. And by morning, that process begins to show. Before explaining why this happened, it helps to understand what might be going on beneath the surface. Sometimes soil can look healthy for a long time, and then slowly stop supporting the plant the way it used to. This can feel sudden, but in most cases, it happens gradually. The soil does not truly become dead, but it can become inactive. Healthy soil is not just a place where roots sit. It is a living system. It holds moisture, air, and tiny organisms that help break down nutrients. When these elements are balanced, the plant receives what it needs without much effort. But over time, this balance can shift. Repeated watering without proper soaking, or frequent feeding without rest, can cause the soil to tighten. The surface may begin to seal. Air spaces become smaller. Water may run through too quickly or sit unevenly. When this happens, the plant may still receive water, but not in a way it can use well. Nutrients may be present, but not easily absorbed. The soil appears present, but its function becomes limited. This is why a plant can look like it is struggling, even when it is being cared for regularly. There are often quiet signs that the soil is under stress. These signs are easy to miss at first. The plant may grow more slowly than before. Leaves might lose some of their color, becoming slightly pale or uneven in tone. You may notice that water does not soak in the same way. It might sit on the surface for a moment before disappearing, or it may run through quickly without fully moistening the soil. The top layer can feel firm or slightly crusted. Sometimes the pot feels light again very soon after watering, or in garden beds, the surface dries faster than expected. These are small changes, but together they point to a shift in how the soil is functioning. It is important to observe these signs without rushing to fix them immediately. The goal is not to react quickly, but to understand what the soil is telling you. One of the most common responses at this stage is to add more fertilizer. It feels like the logical next step. If the plant looks weak, it must need more nutrients. But this is where many gardeners, even experienced ones, can make a small but important mistake. Adding more fertilizer to already stressed soil does not always solve the problem. In some cases, it can make it harder for the plant to recover. This is not because fertilizer is harmful on its own, but because the soil may not be in a state to use it properly. When the soil structure is tight or uneven, nutrients can build up in certain areas while remaining unavailable in others. The roots may not be able to reach them effectively. This can lead to a situation where the soil has plenty of nutrients, but the plant still shows signs of deficiency. It is not a matter of doing something wrong. It is simply a matter of timing and balance. This leads to an important idea that can feel a bit unexpected. Sometimes, adding more does not help. In fact, it can slow things down. When soil becomes compacted or inactive, what it often needs is not more input, but a chance to reset. This does not mean leaving it completely dry or unattended. It means giving it the right kind of moisture and allowing time for natural processes to begin again. Too much frequent watering can also play a role here. Light watering that only wets the surface can encourage shallow patterns. The deeper layers remain dry, and the soil does not develop a stable structure. On the other hand, soaking the soil properly and then allowing it to rest can create a different response. This is where the overnight change begins to make more sense. During the night, when temperatures are cooler and evaporation slows down, the soil has time to hold moisture more evenly. Water spreads through the small spaces between particles. Air pockets adjust. Tiny organisms in the soil begin to move and react to the moisture. These organisms are part of what makes soil active. They help break down organic matter and make nutrients available to roots. When the soil is too dry or too tight, their activity slows down. But when moisture returns in a steady and gentle way, they begin to work again. This process is not loud or visible, but it is steady. Over several hours, the soil begins to soften. Its structure becomes more open. Roots find it easier to move and absorb. Many gardeners do not notice this shift because it happens quietly, often overnight, without any dramatic sign. The key idea here is not about adding something new. It is about restoring a condition that allows the soil to function again. Moisture and rest, when combined, can create this change. You might begin to see the first signs of this the next morning. The soil no longer feels as firm. When you touch it, it gives slightly under your fingers. The surface looks more natural, less sealed. The plant may respond in small ways. Leaves can appear a bit more relaxed. They may not be fully vibrant yet, but they show less stress. These are gentle signs, and they are important to notice. This is not an instant transformation. It is the beginning of a shift. At this point, it helps to understand the simple method that allows this process to happen more consistently. In the evening, water the soil slowly and thoroughly. Allow the water to soak in rather than run off. If the soil is very dry, you may need to water in stages, giving it time to absorb. The goal is not to flood the soil, but to ensure that moisture reaches deeper layers. Once the soil is evenly moist, allow it to rest overnight. Avoid disturbing it during this time. In the morning, check the soil gently. You may notice that it holds moisture more evenly. The top layer may still be slightly damp, but not overly wet. This simple pattern, deep watering followed by rest, can help restore balance over time. What makes this approach different from frequent feeding is that it works with the soil's natural system rather than adding to it. Fertilizers can be helpful, but only when the soil is ready to use them. When the soil is functioning well, even small amounts of nutrients become more effective. Different climates can influence how quickly you see these changes. In warmer areas, moisture may evaporate faster, so the timing of watering becomes important. Evening watering works well because it reduces loss from heat. In cooler climates, the soil may hold moisture longer, so less frequent soaking may be needed. Indoor plants also behave differently, as they are not exposed to wind or direct sunlight in the same way. It is helpful to adjust based on your environment, rather than following a fixed schedule. There is also a gentle caution to keep in mind. While deep watering is helpful, too much water without proper drainage can lead to other problems. The soil should be able to release excess water. If it stays overly wet for long periods, roots may struggle in a different way. This is why it is important to observe how your soil behaves after watering. It should feel moist, not heavy or waterlogged. As for how often to use this approach, it depends on the condition of your soil. If the soil has been dry and compacted, you may repeat this process a few times over several days, allowing the soil to gradually improve. Once the soil begins to feel more balanced, you can return to a more regular watering pattern, focusing on depth rather than frequency. Over time, many gardeners notice that their plants become more stable. Growth may not be sudden, but it becomes more consistent. Leaves hold their color better. The soil remains easier to manage. These changes come from allowing the soil to do its work, rather than constantly trying to adjust it from the outside. If you're comfortable sharing, I'm curious how your soil feels after watering. Does it stay soft, or does it become firm again quickly? Sometimes the most helpful step is not doing more, but doing less with more awareness. The garden often responds best when given the chance to settle and restore itself. And in many cases, improvement begins quietly, in the hours when nothing seems to be happening. Sometimes the garden improves when we simply step back and observe.